Madam Chair, I will forgo the opportunity to defend the OVP 2025 budget proposal by question and answer. I will leave it to the House of Representatives to decide on the 2025 budget.
Honorable Rosas, you may proceed.
Madam Chair,
Can the Vice President of the Philippines avoid answering questions from Congress during budget deliberations? Have you ever wondered if the Vice President of the Philippines can just brush off questions from Congress when discussing the national budget? As one of the top officials in the country, surely the Vice President has the authority to decide when and where to answer questions, right? But what does the law actually say about this? Understanding whether the Vice President is obligated to answer questions from Congress during budget deliberations is not just important for those in power, but also for every Filipino citizen. Why? Because transparency and accountability are the foundation of a functioning democracy. And the budget represents how the government allocates taxpayer money. Knowing the legal boundaries and obligations of public officials ensures that citizens can demand transparency in public spending and hold their leaders accountable. If you're curious about how this plays out in Philippine law and want to learn more about the limits of executive privilege, subscribe to our channel, and let's dive into the legal facts. Can the Vice President ignore questions from Congress in budget deliberations? Let's break it down.
The role of Congress in budget deliberations, the General Appropriations Act, GAA, is the law that dictates how public funds will be allocated for government programs and operations each year. Under the Philippine Constitution, Congress holds the power of the purse, meaning it is the legislative body responsible for crafting and approving the national budget. As part of this process, Congress scrutinizes the proposed budget submitted by the executive branch, and that includes questioning public officials like the Vice President. What does the law say? According to the 1987 Philippine Constitution, specifically Article 6, Section 21, Congress, through its committees, can conduct inquiries in aid of legislation. This includes the power to summon any government official, including the Vice President, to provide explanations regarding budgetary matters. The goal of this process is to ensure that government spending is justified and transparent, making sure public funds are spent efficiently. Further, the Constitution also provides in Section 22 of Article 6 the question hour, or department heads may be requested to appear before Congress to explain any matter pertaining to their departments. While the Vice President does not directly head a department, if they are also appointed to lead an executive department, such as in the case of the current Vice President concurrently serving as a cabinet secretary, this provision directly applies.
Is refusal an option? Here's where it gets tricky. In certain situations, public officials, including the Vice President, might attempt to invoke executive privilege to avoid answering specific questions. However, this privilege is not absolute. In GR number 169777, known as the case of Senate versus Executive Secretary Eduardo Ermita, 2006, the Supreme Court ruled that executive privilege cannot be used as a shield to avoid all forms of legislative inquiry, particularly when it comes to matters related to the budget or other administrative functions that require transparency. The court made it clear that while some matters, such as national security or sensitive diplomatic negotiations, may be protected by executive privilege, financial matters involving public funds are typically not covered. In the budget deliberations for the General Appropriations Act, invoking executive privilege to dodge questions about government spending, particularly when it involves transparency in the use of public funds, would likely be an overreach and could be challenged.
Related jurisprudence, several cases support the idea that public officials, including the Vice President, cannot simply ignore Congress during budget deliberations. Senate versus Executive Secretary Ermita, GR number 169777, 2006. This case famously limited the scope of executive privilege, ruling that the executive branch cannot use privilege to avoid inquiries about public spending or administration unless it involves national security or diplomacy. On NRS Party List v. Executive Secretary. GR number 215746, 2019. The Supreme Court reinforced the importance of transparency and the role of Congress in budget deliberations. It emphasized that Congress has the authority to scrutinize budget allocations, and executive officials are obligated to provide explanations. Bayan Muna versus Ermita, GR number 169659, 2006. This case highlighted that while the President and other high-ranking officials may invoke privilege, it is not an open-ended right. The privilege must be based on a clear necessity and cannot be used to obstruct the legislative inquiry process. GR number 179370, 2009. This decision confirmed that the Civil Service Commission and Congress have the authority to investigate irregularities in government spending, illustrating that oversight extends to all officials, including the Vice President.
Executive privilege versus accountability. While executive privilege exists to protect sensitive government functions, using it to avoid legitimate inquiries into government spending can result in public backlash and legal challenges. Transparency in the budget process is a cornerstone of democracy, and avoiding questions can erode public trust. In the case of Romulo L. Neri versus Senate Committees, GR number 180643, 2008, the Supreme Court allowed the invocation of executive privilege only in matters of national interest, but even then, the court acknowledged that executive privilege must be justified and is subject to judicial review. Thus, while the Vice President might attempt to avoid answering certain questions by invoking privilege, they must present a clear, compelling reason, or they risk being challenged both politically and legally. Congress, representing the people, has the right to demand answers, particularly regarding the budget, the importance of transparency in public spending, the Vice President's role in answering questions during budget deliberations is vital for ensuring that public funds are allocated wisely and transparently. The 1987 Constitution and Philippine jurisprudence repeatedly underscore the principle of transparency and accountability. Any attempt to evade questions, especially related to how taxpayer money is spent, can be seen as a violation of this principle. But here's a thought-provoking question: if the Vice President, or any public official, could freely evade answering budget-related questions from Congress, what would prevent misuse or corruption of public funds? Conclusion. In summary, can the Vice President of the Philippines ignore the questions of Congress during budget deliberations? The answer is clear: no, they cannot. The law and the courts have established that all government officials are accountable to Congress, particularly when it comes to the management of public funds. While executive privilege exists, its application is limited, and budget transparency is a constitutional duty. Want to stay informed about your government's legal obligations and your rights as a citizen? Make sure to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to get updated with our latest content. What do you think? Should the Vice President have more leeway in invoking executive privilege during budget inquiries? Or is full transparency the key to good governance? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates on legal issues that matter to you. Keep learning and stay informed.